Here's a look at Maiden Square in Kyiv, Ukraine. We have some new developments this morning in the ongoing threat of war along that country's border. There are now mixed messages from Russia over whether it will invade Ukraine. Moscow claims that it's pulling back some of the troops it has stationed near the border with Ukraine as other military drills continue. For the latest on this, let's bring in Jackson Proskow from Washington. Jackson, so what are we hearing from Russia this morning, and what does this mean for the likelihood of an invasion?
Well, good morning, Blake. You're right. Russia does say that it is pulling back some of the troops that were apparently engaged in these military exercises throughout the week. But just a short time ago, the Secretary-General of NATO said they've seen no evidence of this supposed Russian troop withdrawal, and they caution that Russia is still planning military exercises in the Mediterranean. And of course, the vast number of those troops, the estimated 130,000, continue to surround Ukraine on all three sides. And so the language coming from NATO allies that an invasion could happen at any moment remains. That still stands. That is still the view of NATO allies. In fact, a short time ago, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson spoke and said that UK intelligence assessments remain quite worrying in this situation, Blake.
Okay, so take what we're hearing from the Russian Defense Ministry with a grain of salt. We'll need to see what happens as it pertains to troop movement at the border. What is the latest, though, on diplomatic efforts now to resolve the crisis?
The fact that Russia is suggesting that it's pulling back some troops does seem to leave that window open for further diplomacy. It would be interpreted as a sign of de-escalation if, in fact, it can be verified by the West. So that is one positive sign here. The Ukrainians certainly hope that diplomacy remains a possibility in this situation, as does the West. But again, the worrying signs seem to trump that right now. And it almost sort of seems like a 50-50 bet as to which way this is going to go right now. No one actually seems to know. But one thing people are really dialing in on was this meeting yesterday between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Foreign Secretary Sergei Lavrov, in which Lavrov sort of gave this highly scripted briefing, but suggested that the window for diplomacy has not yet closed. Those avenues for de-escalation still exist.
Okay, but as you mentioned, NATO allies still very concerned with the buildup of Russian troops at the border. It seems like they're preparing for the worst. What's the latest there?
Yeah, we saw that announcement from Canadian officials yesterday of increased funding and increased lethal aid to Ukraine. We're seeing similar moves from countries around the world with the option of loan guarantees, for example, to prop up the Ukrainian government, allow them to keep functioning. We should point out that financial support is something that Ukraine has said it could really use right now. But we're also seeing those worrying signs. For example, the United States announced yesterday that it is shuttering its embassy in Kyiv, sending the few remaining diplomatic staff who are there to the western part of Ukraine, further away from what could be the front lines if Russia proceeds with an invasion. And of course, those dire warnings that the U.S. and many NATO allies have given to their own citizens to leave the country immediately while it's still possible. And the window for that seems to be closing because, of course, insurance companies no longer want to insure aircraft in Ukrainian airspace, meaning that the number of commercial flights available continues to dwindle by the day.
Well, something we will watch in the hours and days to come. Thank you so much, Jackson Proskow in Washington for us this morning.